Every day at school, he got trampled by the students and made a mess of his clothes. Even the girl who fell for him left with bullying, yet life turned cruel again. He found Truckcoin and decided to rebirth as Lucas Ryan, living in a kingdom where love was a sacred duty and all martial arts were feared and hated. Lucas discovered magic everywhere and soon became a genius in an academy that ruled the world with supreme power. The ancient wizard named Alara stepped onto the stage of Arcanus, where the air hummed with anticipation as the sun began its daily routine, signaling that a holy ceremony had just started for everyone who gathered there. Kids under 6 are the happiest of all when they show their most valuable treasures to the gods. If you accepted this request from a magical child, a divine messenger would send him to learn the art of magic. He realized that magic didn't come with expensive jewelry. It came with a very nice piece of candy. So he asked his mother, "Is that enough?" She laughed and said, "No, you need something just as valuable." A noblewoman then pointed to her gemstone, saying, "The more precious the gift, the better your chance of getting a blessing." Finally, a man joined in, noting with surprise how much he had spent his entire fortune for this sweet reward. It would have been a tragedy if not for the miracle of being born with that amazing gift. Holt Ryan, the family head, knew that gambling his way through every family member's future was a risky gamble. He felt absolutely sure that his kids, Leica and Lewis Ryan, would get their share of top-tier rewards. A veteran usher called out the top candidate and shouted, "Julia Ryan," in a thunderous voice as the room's attention focused on her. The little girl stepped forward and set her tiny crown upon the sacred place. The ground suddenly erupted into a massive cloud of dust, causing the MC to gasp as they looked around in confusion about what was happening next. He wondered if that was a true gift from Kahai, the thunder god, who held the title of Level 7. She spent 12 years watching her brilliant sister shine above the rest, while her proud dad proudly announced that the whole family was destined to be famous for this amazing achievement. It was hard for the girl to wake up because she didn't know exactly what went wrong. Her mom said the gift wasn't worth much if they had to spend all their money on it. The guest pointed out a missing child, telling him to bring the legendary treasure. Lucas stood up as Holt knelt in front of him and said, "He's next." The little boy looked at his friend and nodded quickly, clearly agreeing with what Holt had told him. The old man stepped forward and offered his long sword to the boy as he waited. The noise in the crowd made everyone jump when someone waved a light sword, shouting that the energy was moving. Behind the boy, named Volcanus, a mysterious figure stepped forward, representing the fiery deity himself. The little sister's wish for a big brother meant more than words. When she finally told him that, the MC stepped forward and offered himself as an unchangeable value to test his friend's heart. Lucas stepped forward to raise a hand in prayer at the altar. The sky outside shifted its hue with a wild surprise, causing everyone to stifle their laughter as they realized something far beyond their normal understanding of the world. He stepped forward to the altar where a young boy sat, and suddenly a sword began to float up in the air while watching him closely. The beam of light flooded his entire arm like a storm cloud, sealing the darkness inside him forever. The air seemed thick with tension as another figure suddenly grabbed a sharp piece of metal and stood before them. Suddenly, an outsider shouted that the sky was back to its usual calm state. Holt stared at the sky as he thought, wondering if the peace had truly returned and whether that quiet god's spirit still lived in the place. Her youngest daughter watched as she reached out to touch the sacred stone at the altar. Lucas ran away as the stone wall blocked his path, leaving him sitting still on the floor after being kicked off by a guard. His mom and dad ran in from the house when he shouted at them for not coming home. His dad and mom sprinted toward the bed to yawn him out loud. The MC said his hero was kicked out after the god showed he wasn't good enough. Lucas Ryan had simply gone missing from their old home as a baby. A family member lifted a heavy weight and let it fall, creating a bright beam of sunlight that hit another person in the room. In the fiery realm where gods spoke, a whisper whispered that something was wrong. The Ryan family laughed at how they let a powerful old thing take control of the world. The sword stopped mid-air as he gripped his own hands tightly, and he looked straight into the eyes of those who had cut him with such a fierce intent that he vowed to forget them for good. His loyal servants cheered when he chose to refuse the child's sweet gift instead of giving it away. A mysterious spirit spotted someone inside him and demanded he leave, while the fire god insisted that wasting effort on such a strange visitor was unnecessary. The man looked down at the new gift he'd just given and realized something else was happening. Suddenly, that precious item felt alive, like it had been breathing inside him before even touching his hand. Then a deep, soft voice whispered in his ear, and finally, an eye blinked open to meet the world again. In the heavens where gods fight for glory, The warrior stood alone and stared hard at his target, ready to make a bold move. He moved with one smooth step and broke the wall. A mysterious entity stepped out of deep space and pointed directly at you, demanding permission to enter its own realm. The cosmos has no choice, it murmured, its voice echoing like a low hum across infinite dimensions. You asked gently if the cosmic monster wanted to prevent you from reaching that higher dimension. The cosmic beast launched a massive beam of energy that scorched the ground, yet the man sprinted across the battlefield, slamming his fist into the air as he unleashed a powerful charge right in front of it all. The impact hit so hard that the creature was completely knocked out of its footing. As the entity vanished, his hand caught a spinning whirlwind before he could fully fade away. He now stepped into a new world of portals. A tiny little thing flew right up to the mighty warrior and said, "Lord Martial God, you really have no idea how much power you hold." He grabbed the mysterious object. He asked himself why his guardsman's spirit had been stopping him from moving forward. He felt suddenly that his old friend, Raikou, had gone missing right behind him. The ancient spirit stepped forward with a strange image of people in red robes across the Arcanus continent, causing everyone to look at him with awe as they struggled to keep their eyes clear. The spirits of 1,000-year-old warriors whispered to him about how those ancient hands could crush steel, yet today, under the blazing gaze of Arcanus's fire god, they felt like an unbearable weight to carry alone. He wasn't even interested in passing them on, but he knew that duty was his own business. He was a tiny creature who spent every second working his hardest toward becoming better at the job he hated. The shadow vanished instantly and turned into a tiny burst of golden light. Suddenly, a strange light woke up in her head, making the world feel like a foggy dream and wondering if she was truly real. As he opened his wide eyes, the question hung in the air like a storm cloud waiting to break free. The boy lay asleep in his bed while seeing his own reflection become a group of terrifying, identical beings known just as well as the original one. The wrathful gods Mars, who stood guard over him with no mercy left to spare. The girl watched her friends glide over the boy's sleeping place and then burst toward him. He felt a sudden blinding flash of white light shoot past his eyes as if the air itself was snapping open. Then he fell back against the wall in silence. He finally got his 9th-level martial god gift, and suddenly the rules saying he couldn't train anymore were gone for good. The young man lay sprawled in his bed, staring up at a towering figure who looked like a real god, wondering why he was being asked to explain all of this martial arts stuff. He thought back to those powerful figures he had seen and stared at his own trembling hands, wondering exactly what had happened next. He remembered that car crash and asked himself why he ended up in the room. That painful memory flooded his mind like a floodgates opening, sending him straight to Lucas Ryan's face. Did he even check his reflection? He looked down and wondered if the world around him would really get that hard. A lollipop fell to the bed while he pondered how Azusa would live once her mother was gone. Yet he kept asking himself if martial arts truly gave him a blessing or just a new way of doing things. His heart raced as he turned his gaze to that narrow doorway, where a small girl stepped out and shouted for her big brother. She sprinted over and crashed into his arms on a mattress, sharing a warm embrace in that quiet moment. It sounded like the girl was saying he'd have a long time before getting ready, so she must be super worried about him waking up. She held his hand tightly so he wouldn't cry again, understanding instantly that she was his Julia and his Lucas's sister. He thought of Azusa, who had gone through a terrible blow and now feels like she's still breathing hard. So he thought about protecting those people who mattered most in this world and looked for any chance of help from that powerful ancient warrior god. A towering angelic figure sits proudly atop a magnificent altar in the middle of the grand hall. Then, darkness overflows and tears stream down its eyes as it begins to weep. A mysterious stone figure weeps as it offers up a stained hand to darkness. Nearby, a woman observes and notes with disbelief how quickly the dreadful man's shadow has faded away. She stares at the glowing symbol pinned to her chest and asks herself, did he really fall from heaven, or was it just a desperate wish? Her heart feels light as she realizes that all her strength is gone. She bursts into the room where darkness has swallowed everything around her, shouting to the empty air, I'm going to take control, and I'll leave you behind. Years have passed since the Ryan family held their final gathering, where a calm and peaceful atmosphere finally settled over the estate. Lucas watches as the sky clears up and suddenly thinks his own training is done. He decided on the impossible. He grabbed a massive thorn bush and lets it pull him up into the sky. Lucas keeps wondering if he'll get a chance to do another one. He turns his head to see who's actually in charge. Jeremy Ryan smiles warmly at Lucas, who has remained hidden and hiding behind a wall of fear when he was kicked out by the gods. Jeremy reminded Lucas that his backyard was finally reserved exclusively for the family's mages. Jeremy tells Lucas to leave the plan until his sister finishes her magic class before it gets too late. Jeremy called the guy a coward because he kept hiding behind his trembling sister, who stuttered about feeling scared by a tiny spark of lightning. He feels a sudden, heavy blow straight into his sternum, as if a giant rock fell right onto his heart. The maid screamed as she watched her master sprawl across the floor, smoking with a look of complete despair. Lucas looks around and sees a shadowy figure moving toward the gate as they stand in the doorway. Young Julia was telling Jeremy about his trouble with his own brother and warned him that if he kept bullying her again, she wouldn't go easy on him at all. She bursts into a loud puff of air and lets out a hearty laugh while the crowd laughs along with her. She quickly looks at her brother and shouts, "I'm going to take these thorns off him now." He bumped her head as if trying to convince her that the sun was shining through a cloud. Lucas holds firm to the front of Jeremy's neck while shouting, "I got your lessons." Jeremy can't seem to move his hands because he's staring blankly at nothing. Without another moment of hesitation, the maid stepped aside as he slipped away completely. Lucas watched Jeremy sprinting so hard he had to slow down as soon as she hit the floor, leaving him completely surprised by her sudden softness. Julia asked herself why he couldn't fight back, because she knew his heart was finally beating fast enough to beat back her own heart. You're right to trust him, because he really knows you're safe, and he'll keep protecting you until the end. He watched the mansion stretch out before him as time flowed back 99 years since the day he stepped back into Lucas's life. Lucas woke up in a strange new world where his dad, Holt, hugged him and told him everyone else would leave him alone instead of making him feel guilty about not doing well. He's the kind of man who commands over 20 knights but barely stays at home, yet Holt still keeps them safe. When Holt spotted Lucas preparing for his new martial arts journey, he rushed to send him a quick note packed with important details. He wrote a letter telling his family about old martial art books in the archives that might prove useful. He walked down a long, dim hallway as darkness crept in and a single flickering candle burned its way through to light his path forward. Thanks for the letter, and now that the plan is ready, he can actually start working on it. In today's day, a maid hurriedly called out for young Master Lucas as he stepped outside the grand mansion door. The first maid asked where she had gone, while the second insisted she wouldn't feel sorry for the trouble. But then both of them were shocked to see what happened. The ground beneath her seems to tremble as she wonders if anyone else is feeling this shift. Yet her companion offers a light reassurance that the shaking might only be earth magic practiced by one person. Meanwhile, deep within the dark cave, a fist smashes through an old stone wall with surprising force. As Lucas wipes sweat from his face after stepping back from a pile of rubble, he pauses to take in a quiet aftermath before turning toward the crowd below. It's time for him to look into the dusty hole where his work has been made. He knows exactly where the files lie now and how deep they go down, so he doesn't need a second pass just yet. 6 months of hard work turned that empty lot into a hidden fortress where every corner was perfect for training. But his wallet ran dry when he couldn't afford the fancy tub needed to keep his own space clean and ready for tomorrow's lessons. He trains secretly at work all day after finishing. And today, he finds himself relaxing in a soothing medicinal bath where his muscles feel perfectly strong from that powerful workout. 3 years have passed since he finally got a chance to try that wild, unpredictable tempering method he discovered in the dusty archives, and now it's all back on him like nothing has ever been worse. He jumps out of the tub and sees that his magic has dropped to a dull level where nothing could hurt him anymore. His defensive line finally took shape, and he turned toward the offensive field. A fierce trainee swings his broadsword across the air, while the instructor's voice echoes behind him as he executes a rapid sequence of brutal strikes. He's really good at training, and he always uses that big spear. Finally, he steps back from the training dummy, which is now completely destroyed. He finally cracked the 4th rule of his spear and decided to try out his fist for one more day before training again tomorrow. He's been getting better at his job lately, but something keeps nagging him about it. The stories say some masters stop at a hard ceiling, and once they cross it, there isn't another way around it. But the real reason so few of these incredible athletes actually stick is because getting that deep enlightenment feels like an impossible mountain. It's not just about breaking that limit. It's about finally knowing what you're really capable of doing without giving up your heart. He steps over the barrel and shouts, "I'm not your friend." When he strikes the barrel with such force that the shell shatters right in its path, it's all over. He has hit a 5th wall in his fist, and every time he tries to push himself up further, the wall keeps getting harder and higher with no way out. He realized this must be the exact kind of gift that he and his friends deserve to receive. When Holt finally pulled out the keys, he remembered that today's dinner was actually his own birthday at the end of the month. The hallway leads him straight into the big dining room doors. As soon as they opened, their whole family was already sitting right by the table. Holt jumps up as the clock ticks past 6 months since his last meeting, so he waves his hand and lets you sit down instead. Holt tells Lucas to go join the Allen Magic Academy, because they're opening a new martial arts wing. He knows martial arts are hard to master, so he insists Lucas can do it too, and he tells him the entrance exam will be in just a few weeks. Lucas almost immediately thanked his father. He looks at Lucas and wonders why the guy seems so strong when he should be trying harder. Julia's dad looks at the clock and says, "Let's go to Allen Magic Academy with your friend Lucas." Julia snaps back because Holt thinks being at school is too easy when she's only 11 years old. She says she's already got her own ticket for the elite crowd. Holt stared hard at the screen as he tried to make sense of what she was saying about the project. She whispers to her husband about how Julia is becoming an elite genius, suggesting that maybe he should give birth to one of those great mages first. Julia giggled while Lucas pointed out how amazing the situation was, leaving Jeremy feeling really annoyed at the thought. Jeremy finds himself in shock when his friend announces that the other side wants everyone passing through. Yet he asks Lucas what's happening because something feels different about them now. A hand gently brushes over her cheek as a soft voice whispers, "You don't have to worry about anything." Jessica Ryan comforts Jeremy, noting that she knows Lucas might fail the test, even if he does better than expected. A week after the sun set, everyone gathered by the estate gates as a special goodbye arrived. Julia's mom was all over it. She kept telling them to be careful and said she'd come back for her special pudding soon. But then she also reminded them they couldn't let go of that lucky coin their dad had gifted them. A golden coin from the ancient Born dynasty, made nearly 10,000 years ago, held its own because its owner had conquered a magical beast and claimed it as his own treasure. Holt handed out a shiny coin and told everyone that its gold symbol was the first emperor of humanity, Mars. Lucas froze in surprise when he saw the man, then immediately told everyone to put that item on their person because it was truly a lucky charm. Lucas tucked the coin into his pocket like it was a prized treasure, feeling incredibly blessed to have that kind of wonderful life in his bloodline. In the end, she waved her hand for goodbyes, and then they began their journey together. He stood over the empty clearing and watched the sky turn red as the sun dipped below, knowing that his team would have to wait for a fresh start right there after the fire was out. Around the warm campfire, a man named Forden told them exactly what to expect as they headed home by nightfall the next morning. Julia turned around to ask Mr. Forden what he saw at the wonderful city of Daku. Mr. Bott and Forden agreed that the annual Magic Dodgeball tournament must be huge. Lucas watched as Julia began to gush saliva before a sudden gust of wind swept the dark woods nearby. Suddenly, a dozen eager horses and 13 curious travelers burst toward the road at a mere 2 kilometers distance. Forden stared at him and said, "It's not like bandits are around here." His wild tempering style made him notice the world from a new angle because he knew he wasn't dreaming. He knew with dread that there were only 5 people in the group, including one little boy who had to stay very close behind him. The guy stood up and shouted, "Oh no, a dangerous group, must be right here, and we have to get in formation before it gets too late." Forden could not quite hear the words, so he glanced around nervously before realizing that the young Master Lucas was simply telling a joke that made him laugh rather than worry at all. He ordered the guards to grab their weapons right away while he stayed completely lost about where Lucas had found the secret key, knowing that staying safe meant taking matters into his own hands. Then, a pack of wild horses rumbled as they burst into the woods and started charging at everyone. The guards spotted the riders and confirmed they were there. Then the bandit leader watched them with pride because the boss had been right when he said the place was packed full of nobles. One of the 2 people said that the little girl and the boy beside her would make a nice amount for their ransom. Forden stepped forward and asked, "Did anyone have a thought about what would happen to the rich men?" The bandit leader ordered his men to attack everyone except 2 little children. The attackers moved forward. One of the guards ran over to give Mr. Forden cover as another bandit charged on horseback and raised his sword to strike, but the guard intercepted him and delivered a spear blow. A tough bandit leader watched his friend stumble over the edge of a cliff, knowing he was about to be swallowed by darkness. Forden sprinted into the fray, wading through the chaos with a bright smile on his face. He smiled and said, "Miss Julia, you would better move this over to me." A sharp strike sent him flying as he surged into the fray, slamming into 10 rough-looking bandits who had been running at full speed. Julia ran away with her friend as the young Master Lucas shouted a loud order from behind him. The sudden noise made Lucas's eyes widen as he saw someone rushing toward him, and his heart hammered against his ribs as he stepped back to watch them leave. The bad guys threw a blazing fireball onto those last few security guards who were holding everything back. He saw a massive mage and grinned as he ordered his men to sprint toward the woods. then looked back at a bandit lurking just behind him before charging straight for the enemy. Lucas rushed over the table like a storm cloud, his eyes wide as he saw Forden screaming loudly for the first time since the night before. The man slowly stood from his seat, battered and heartbroken, as a tide of angry enemies poured out to surround him. He laughed at the promise of burning him to death because he defeated his friend. He stood ready to fight, shouting that he would defend both the young master and the young lady, no matter how dangerous it meant for him. Lucas felt a sudden chill that made him realize Forden was just level 2, so he kept the secret safe while secretly wishing Forden would be kinder to him. Until now, he found himself completely in his own face. Julia was scared because her brother had been hit in the face. He didn't want anyone watching that fight. She sat down beside him as he began kneeling, carefully arranging his words so he could tell her he would be coming to help Forden. He smiled happily as his sister said, "Be careful." Lucas sprinted toward the fight, while Forden clashed with a bandit nearby. He stumbled down the stairs, clutching his head as he tried to catch himself before falling further. Forden stared as the bandits' swords flashed in the dark, and suddenly, they all vanished into a cloud of dust before he even saw them go down. The other bandits stared at the strange object and whispered, "What's that?" A team of fast men shot out and defeated a couple of tough guys right away, while the rest of their squad also made it under fire as a sudden burst of flames erupted from Lucas's grip. Oh wow, he made a big comment about how his Gale Strikes are now at the highest level, and even beating level 1 bandit groups is so easy. The bandit cursed in terror before turning his back on them, saying, "Who gave me such a fright?" The leader suddenly felt like everyone was blown up in a flash of victory. One final attack was sent by the voice that screamed of his arrival, and a massive fireball shot straight toward Forden. Forden stood with no magic shield and couldn't help anyone, but he felt terrible anyway because he knew his kids would still be there. Lucas rushed forward and grabbed Lucas before he could reach the heavens to stop the attack. He charged straight into the fiery blast with a determined face, ready to take whatever came next. Forden stared at the man and couldn't shake disbelief in those eyes. After the smoke finally faded, Lucas stood alone and waited patiently in that empty room. Forden shouted to him while a young master stood by, and the bandit leader gasped as his fiery weapon vanished. The boy fought hard with a new magic, but Lucas was ready too. A single thunderous blow struck, knocking out the villain right in front of Lucas, who then stumbled forward onto the horse before vanishing into a blur of speed. Forden watched Lucas and Jeremy pull away in shock, then grinned as the older man stepped forward and asked what they were doing. He turned to show off his skill with martial arts, but suddenly a shadowy shape crawled out from behind them. The creature rose up, revealing its skeletal face before ordering Lucas Ryan and Jeremy Ryan to die. Lucas froze, eyes fixed on the looming creature as he knew his time was running out, ready to rush home before the beast could take him away. Jeremy leaped through the air, diving straight for that monster. He whipped the monster's head like a blade of fire. Lucas watched as his friend rushed to cover him, while another man suddenly slammed into the floor nearby. He slammed his fist into the ground and felt a torrent of energy shoot up through the earth, sending shock waves that rippled across every corner of the room before finally hitting the floor in a powerful splash. A giant chain of metal snapped free from the ground and pulled up a weary man. At the fight, Lucas asked himself what a strange thing had been. A shining mark appeared in the monster's pupil as if a star was born inside its soul. Did he think that thought was telling him exactly how to control someone who had already died? The monster's huge mouth began to open wide. Jeremy decided to talk about a new way to fight if his usual moves never worked again. Jeremy swung his big arms hard at the monster right in its face. Lucas stepped forward and punched a giant symbol straight into the beast's eye as he prepared to strike again. A beam of pure power ripped through the trees as the giant monster shrieked in pain before vanishing into nothingness. As Lucas sat frozen in place, letting the shadow of the monster fade away behind him, Julia ran after him, but as he collapsed at her feet, she turned around and started chasing again. He laughed as Julia hugged him and asked if he had beaten down every villain in his life. Jeremy looked around at the screen and asked himself, "What have we done?" Lucas stepped aside as a loud noise began to echo from the other direction. In the quiet woods, a horse let out a loud whoop as if it were screaming for attention. A brave rider rode a majestic horse along the open plain, ready for adventure. Maya Rasta sat right at the top of the giant animal's back with her eyes wide open, watching the world pass by below her. Several brave men got locked up inside a strange cave they had found together. When the cult hostess asked about who had finally eliminated number 44, she immediately said restoring her own strength was the most important thing. Julia had stood back in the woods and told her friend that her name was Maya Rasta. Lucas laughed as if he had heard him say that name before, because he knew he was hearing something new coming up in his head. Julia sat beside Maya and whispered that they felt exactly the same. Lucas explained that both the Rasta and Ryan families were wealthy nobles who lived right next door to Daku City. Julia looked down at Maya and whispered, "I remember now." Maya stepped in from the shadows and saw bandits suddenly attack her carriage a few hours before. There was a grin from that outlaw in your old memories. She kept shouting that her guards had been beaten down by the time she got a word in the edict, and then she screamed as her maid-in-waiting tried to shield herself from the blows. Maya decided it wasn't important how many times she told herself she was noble. All it mattered was how much the world actually cared about her story. She stared blankly as one man looked down, completely lost in a world far beyond his own understanding. She decided she wanted only to snatch away the kids from the aristocracy. He paused after telling them everything had turned out well, and everyone was finally defeated. Forden walked up to the young master and whispered, telling him that Miss Maya and Miss Julia were now resting somewhere deep in the quiet night. Lucas pulled Maya aside and asked her directly if she agreed with what she had told him before. Forden stepped forward to ask whether he was referring to the reality that those bandits are professional killers, noting that they must have long been hunting down noble heirs. Lucas explained how he'd team up with a bunch of bandits, hoping to turn their crazy, spell-casting army into his own secret weapon for fighting the undead. Forden stared off to the left, his eyes wide with surprise. The young master stared at the empty room as if he saw a monster lurking in every detail of reality. Forden smiled and promised to call the master right away. He thought about how it might help Maya's life if the Rasta family were told her story at first, since that usually means getting everything they need from them. Lucas nodded seriously because he knew he couldn't make things worse by staying, but then found himself at a loss when Julia suddenly said she'd canceled her wish to visit the whole city next day. Lucas told us that even if a few bandits showed up from last night, it was wise to go straight to the Magic Academy for safety. She felt a rush of worry when he said she had to figure out how to protect Maya and herself, so he urged her to approach him with genuine care rather than just asking questions. Maya felt so sure she knew exactly what that man meant. Julia and Lucas sat side by side in the quiet carriage as they waited for their ride home. Lucas stared hard at his sister, knowing that he had already told her of every delicious treat she needed for the next meal. Maya laughed while listening to Forden's news that they were finally here in town. It was a hot day, so Julia and her little brother got out of their car and jumped out the big glass window. They both looked down at each other with wide eyes, ready for something to happen. Both of them turned their heads toward the bustling city outside. She felt stunned when she looked up at the bright lights and busy roads. The bustling streets hummed with activity, as a man spoke proudly about being the biggest city in history. After all, he had won the title since the imperial capital fell. Maya stood by the open window and watched as a bright crowd bustled outside, making her heart skip a beat. Three friends watched the city together. Lucas watched over the fading daylight, feeling as though the city's mood were a mirror to the one he spent his youth living in. A clown peeked through the window and made the girls jump in fear. Lucas was happily filling the baskets with a warm pile of fresh bread and delicious sweets to give him his friends. Julia was delighted when Maya handed her a sweet snack. The boy stood still and waited for the moment to happen. Forden led them up the long wall and whispered, "I'm done." Lucas gently settled his hands around Julia's shoulders, telling her with a warm smile that he'd always been ready to take care of her, as she felt the reassurance settle in as if it were a promise made while he held her close. He was so incredibly happy to hear her hug him and promise that he'd also be safe with her. He gently rubbed her forehead and whispered that he knew exactly where she stood as a brilliant wizard. Forden watched as she insisted on letting him finish the job with her. Maya laughed as she noticed how her small sister stood guard around him, choosing a brave new personality to keep him safe from the bad guys, while the butler watched them vanish into the dark hallway behind them. Maya stared up at her two siblings with a big grin, feeling like she was having such a lovely day together. Lucas smiled warmly as the people came up to meet him. Maya stared at him as if her heart skipped a beat. Back in that old night of theirs before the spell broke, Forden suddenly remembered something completely different. He told Lucas just how close they were when they were children, even though their engagement was finally shattered after that priest spoke up about his lack of magic talent. The Saramina Empire has chosen Allen Magic Academy as its elite school, making it one of their very best choices. Every new student must pass that entrance exam to get a chance at joining any one of the 4 departments during those 6 years of magical training. Julia looks up as Lucas tells her about the special certification exam, but she sighs and turns away quickly. Maya was waiting for her chance at the entrance exam when she found herself hoping that a stranger might join in. Lucas says Maya has already passed the exam safely because she's got all her friends along. He nudged Maya gently so she could slip in with him, ready to be their new classmate. A shy young girl stepped forward, her eyes wide with curiosity as the crowd gathered around her, eager to learn what was coming next. Julia grabbed Lucas's arm and laughed when a friend noticed his new sister, saying they'd always wanted one like her. A muffled voice cracks its way through the noisy crowd in a sudden whisper. Mina, the vice president who runs the students' club in school, walked over to the window and smiled warmly at everyone inside. Mina asks Julia whether she was merely following her brother, yet the girl insists she is actually going to the exam with him instead. Mina looks closely at Julia, wondering if she's actually the one who got the exclusive spot. Mina giggled and confirmed that her friend was a young girl from the Rhine family. Julia's mom asked Julia, "How do you know the name?" Mina said she'd get back to her in a while and began leading her through the registration zone for a split second, letting Lucas fall behind. The girl paused to let her brother know his registration was needed. Then the vice president turned away and admitted she'd forgotten. Finally, she asked Lucas whether he was still on duty at the martial arts department. The people around him asked him, "Is a martial artist really attending this magical school?" At Allen Academy, some mages look down on the brave and hardworking martial artists who beat them to death at their own hands. The murmurs about the tough guys keep coming in, and Julia tries to calm down, but everyone's still arguing that they're nothing compared to the big ones. Lucas looks up as if telling everyone that opinions are just background noise, and they truly don't count. Mina heard him speak about his job and stopped her from repeating it. A soft, familiar voice drops into the room and says, "Lucas." Mina reaches out her hand to invite him to register and then leads them into the exam hall where everyone gathers to prepare for their test together. She smiled and thanked Lucas. Thousands of eager minds flood into this massive hall as the very first faces show up. The student council member Mina pulls all her classmates into a group chat where they must sign up before we can open the doors to our secret club, so she hands out their new badges for them to wear proudly. With their badges in hand, the students were told exactly which exam number was written inside each badge so they could find their own records instantly. 3 parts of the exam measure your magical potential, how well you fit into compatible traits, and how strong you can be when facing any enemy. Mina tells Lucas that the exam isn't different between martial artists and anyone else. They all get the same score. The young man looked up and said, "That's not fair." He took a deep breath and then clapped his hands together, knowing for sure that he truly understood. Then he declared that one day, anyone watching will see the world for the first time as someone who truly belongs in martial arts training, completely changing how everyone sees him. The examiner calls out to prepare for the first test as Lucas steps forward to watch the needle on the gauge. The guy jumps out and says he never saw something as cool before. When he reaches for the needle on the gauges, Lucas's score is just too low for that special door. The old man slumped over the table, his voice a deep rumble as he regretted the last decision. Then, the new guy stepped forward with a hopeful look, placing his hand firmly on the needle before turning away to leave. The 2 candidates stood frozen in shock as they saw her result. She stands out in class with a 6 out of 10 rating, making her one of the year's top students. He sat in the crowd, watching everyone look at him with eager approval, while he told Julia to let go of her pride for today. She stares intently at the needle fluttering as she focuses all her energy into reading the exact number displayed on the big screen. A powerful burst of energy starts dancing in the air as it fills the whole exam hall. The teacher shouted that the exam score was perfect, exactly 10, and she thought her genius earned her a rare title of greatness. The second-year graduate spent a long time learning her way and finally found herself holding the gauge, showing her perfect score. Julia steps out of her chair as she sees Lucas's phone buzz and decides to go see if he can find his brother. He hugged her gently and asked if the meeting would be good. She smiled and agreed, then turned to him with a hopeful grin. "I'm not sure," she said softly, before he replied. "I'll become an archmage one day." The spectator looked at the wall where a brilliant mind sat next to someone who barely could speak, but his attention was immediately drawn away to the new person approaching them. "Don't get started," his colleague whispered gently. "Let's tackle something easier first." Julia carefully recalibrates her posture, flashing a determined glare to tell everyone she won't let anyone hurt her brother. That 30-year grind for Lucas was always about one big goal. The candidates gathered in a circle inside the testing hall for their compatibility check. Sudden and wild elemental spirits burst from the corners of the room, making the whole place jump. The unsuspecting candidate froze in surprise as he stared at the chaotic display. Julia stood still as spirits from each element started to clump together around her. They spun around her with a happy twist as she turned her head and grinned at them. A candidate sighed that he didn't seem to attract anything at all, while another questioned whether the girl could really match every single element perfectly. Lucas watched from the sidelines as she showed off her incredible skills. She held back her special power because it meant she could finally walk through the door alone, but an angry examiner shouted that Julia Ryan was the best candidate in town, instantly turning her into a celebrity who had no choice but to stay with the group to make peace with herself. Julia sprinted forward and crashed into Lucas, grabbing his back while screaming for him. Her voice cracked as she shouted to her brother, but he didn't hear her until he turned around in the middle of a run. She slipped away behind the figure to ask, "Why are they staring so hard?" Lucas patted Julia's head, explaining that he had chosen her as a genius who would now receive many looks like this. He urged her to learn slowly so she could accept it. He also wanted her mind strengthened to keep up with the attention coming from those men nearby. A boy once thought he was a royalty because his sister's magic seemed amazing, until his useless brother told him to think otherwise. The other guy seemed totally incompatible with him again, just like he did in the last test. The air was instantly thick with dread as the spirits froze in their seats when they saw him enter the hall. The man kept talking about a bizarre thing that finally ended right after the second test started, which was completely weird to watch. Lucas pulled away from the burning embers and saw just how quickly his entire world began to crumble as he stepped out into the dark. His friend seemed unsure about the plot, while Lucas and Julia slipped by him right then. Lucas heard someone talking and smiled gently as he listened. Then he remembered exactly what had happened during that exam. He walked slowly past a line of burning spirit ghosts that seemed to pull at his feet as he tried to pass by them safely. His demeanor became increasingly cruel and mocking as he continued to insult him. As the clock struck midnight when the final exam finished, the sky turned to a raging storm, and one of the flying spirits suddenly snapped out and threw an enormous ball of red-hot fire straight at the boy. He grabbed a tiny rock and let it fly through the air to burn away the flames of that ancient spirit. He said he'd never been treated as if they were servants of the fire god, and that's why he kept acting so bold all along. Then Lucas held on to Julia's hand and pulled her toward the finish line before she could ask for a break. The young man stepped forward and asked if she could win first place in the next competition, but his girlfriend smiled back reassuringly while he added that she would only do it if he didn't go too hard at all. The team stumbled upon a place where nothing could stop them from breaking rules and doing whatever was right in front of everyone. The center of the arena held a massive metal mannequin waiting for everyone to come forward. The girl who was second didn't know how she felt about the man who came back to say he's taken the first prize. She looked down at the fake doll and wondered how long she'd waited before breaking a lifelike thing. Then he spoke up, saying clearly that there was no way she could manage to do it. The mannequins stood guard like knights in armor, crafted from a rare metal that hummed with hidden defense magic. If you're looking for something stronger than a normal fight, then they must be able to stop attacks that come from anyone who has already been cursed by lower levels of evil. He watched Lucas see the enemies looking very tough. Then he gritted his teeth and waited for that perfect moment to try out his level 6 abilities. The boy finally realized that learning to operate a heavy machine was the only way forward at school. Then, an angry friend suddenly grabbed him and forced him to leave the noisy, crowded hallway before he could finish his lesson. She pointed directly at him, telling him to grab his seat so they can sit down together. Then she looked over at the other person and decided to go with them. A young man stopped in front of a crowd and looked directly at her because she had said that using someone is useless, so he insisted he would just get them all out of the way before going to the back. The other girl in line saw his arrival and smiled back. She stiffened up sharply as she looked down at her work. As she walked closer to Lucas and Julia, the air grew quiet and heavy with anticipation. Then Julia smiled and said, "Did I get that score?" She stared down at the floor with a sad face. Julia suddenly felt very terrified and started shouting loudly for her older brother to come to the room. Lucas shielded her as the other girl whispered that something was truly scary to be afraid of. She was the one he asked for. Iowa Miranda stepped forward proudly to announce that she was a grandchild of Duke Miranda, and you could almost hear the proud whisper from her father's side about how they belonged to the same great northern empire. Lucas grew up raising a grand family whose roots went back to a famous wizard who made history, and his mom was just another member of that same powerful bloodline. Catherine was a woman who made a lot of memories, and he remembered her clearly now. Lucas found himself staring at the young woman in front of him, wondering exactly how old she was after learning that she was his cousin. Iowa told me she didn't get the point. Lucas warned her gently that staring at him could look foolish since he was his cousin too. The Iowa girl turned furious when she realized her cousin hadn't been born in the state at all, so she made a move to embarrass him right before anyone else saw him. Then she pulled out a wand and threw it straight into his face, sending a shockwave of magic all over the room. Magic wasn't enough to change Lucas's mind. He simply ordered her to do something gross and embarrassing at that exact moment, yet it made no difference to his soul. He stared at her with a puzzled look as he learned how to use a strange form of magic from the Miranda family, wondering if their way was actually better than anything else. She stared at the ground in disbelief as Iowa said, "If I can't stop this guy from killing me, then he must have some kind of superpower," while the man beside her shook his head and asked if she even thought it was possible to control a martial artist. An examiner stood up and said, "Lucas Ryan." Julia stepped forward when an angry examiner shouted. Another examiner called for her. The Iowa scout pointed directly at the girl and told her she couldn't get cocky, for she was already claiming first place in this test. The basketball player stared intently at his own numbers until he saw Lucas staring straight ahead, ready for a game that would last forever. Julia Ryan started the race at first, and her teammate, Iowa Miranda, took second, so he refused to let anyone else beat them just for their own quiet life. Then someone reached out and handed Julia a piece of candy, making her grin with delight. Julia reached out for a piece of candy and asked herself, what did it taste like? Did she feel happy? He grabbed her by the waist and slaps her down again to make sure she's safe. She gasped in pain and shouted, "You're calling me a liar because the pill isn't candy at all." The boy sat down and said gently that he had brought a rare, magical spell for her to try. She took the bottle out of her bag, feeling her heart race as the dark green liquid poured inside her hand just moments later. He sprinted out of the courtroom and charged at a metal mannequin, but his friend Julia shouted that she never believed it again. She stepped back to let the mannequin finish walking into place. Lucas paused as the examiner gave number 5 a chance to unleash his full magic toward the goal, then quickly stopped and told him not to try at all. He locked his grip tight and shouted, "Let's do it." He stood in the crowd and laughed when a bunch of kids sneered that he'd snap their wrist before anyone else could say anything. A man watched as his friend's younger sister stood beside her, holding back a tearful goodbye. It was a quiet moment when the girl finally said she didn't attack anyone, but instead told her brother he had to be more careful about what he said. The Iowa girl looked at her brother with a surprised smile and asked gently if he truly wasn't capable of using magic. He hesitated for a second, then nodded seriously before she confirmed his bravery. As she spoke, she added that he was still an extraordinary individual whom no one should mock him. Her cousin watched Julia play with the magic of her cousin, thinking she might be tricking him when in reality he was trying to prove his power. A mighty shockwave ripped across the arena, sending everyone into silent, stunned silence. A cloud of dust shimmered before 1,000 faces turned to see what was happening right now. She stared at the floor in shock and thought, what was this? 2 minutes before Lucas checked his watch, he asked the examiner if a single impact was all that was needed. He just said the guy wouldn't care what he did. Lucas stepped into the shadows and waited until he was ready to launch a powerful blow. Years of hard work made his martial arts powers grow bigger and stronger every time he climbed up a new level. At the very top, his biggest move suddenly got a huge upgrade just because he reached that peak height. And now the magic kicked in at a powerful second, leaving nothing to imagine. With a high-speed punch, he was already halfway into the fight. A loud crash sent a mannequin's head flying back into the crowd, while a puff of dust scattered across the arena floor. The mannequin crashed down into the floor, leaving a gaping hole right through his heart. Lucas froze before staring blankly at the mannequin on the floor as Iowa leaned forward and whispered, "You know what they did?" The girl noticed that her friend's thunderclap wasn't just loud. It was like a powerful curse waiting to break through the air. When everyone else watched, she saw he was truly unstoppable and had the power of a god-level wind magic. She looked at him on the screen and realized that he was actually hiding a very powerful secret. The examiner gave Lucas a glowing thumbs up for his flawless test performance, and he immediately stepped forward to help clear away the scattered pieces of the old mannequin. He showed up with his badge on the wall, then looked at Julia right before anyone else saw him. Julia watched as Lucas kept his secret strength hidden from the school while everyone else focused on test scores, leaving him in the center of applause for his unique ability to keep things close. She grabbed a huge pile of energy and surprised everyone nearby with that massive boost. She grabbed all the strength in her staff and pulled them together tight like a powerful magnet, ready to unleash whatever chaos came next. A circle of magic appeared right where she stood. She whispered, "A thunderstorm." A giant bolt of pure magic shot down the clouds. A terrifying blast slammed into a creepy doll as people cheered loudly about how powerful that kind of spell was. The crowd was stunned to see the honor student's incredible strength as one of the people pointed directly at the stage. The ground shook and people whispered when lightning struck the grass nearby, making Julia feel dizzy and unsure whether someone had actually fallen down there. She stayed glued to the floor and didn't even realize what had just occurred. Julia Ryan got a glowing 9.5 from the examiner, who then picked up the call for the next person to test. And back to Lucas as he held her hand, revealing a hidden spell that sent a sudden, powerful lightning bolt shooting straight through the air before she was even ready to react. She stayed still in the quiet room while he waited patiently. Lucas felt a strange pull from the potion he gave her and then chose to stay quiet instead of sharing it. These two superpowers were actually quite different. One mage used fire to burn things while martial artists learned how to use water to wash away enemies, so each held their own secret magic. Two masters of magic and two masters of combat worked side by side to make life better for everyone. When a potion arrived, it needed a medium to make it work. Yet when an elixir was perfected, you could drink it straight from your stomach without any trouble. While magic potions have been a common trick in old days, when those skills got too hard to refine, they finally ran out of use. No magic wizard could make Julia stronger like that without leveling up her refinement skill to 6, and it seemed no other way around it. The most daring fighter in history was the legendary 9-moon martial artist Duke Ready Susan. Lucas decided to keep his level 6 ability hidden as a top secret so he wouldn't get into trouble. It stretched out outside the academy as time began to slide past. Julia sat on a bench, wondering when the lessons were over, while Lucas stood ready for his next tasks. Suddenly, a loud voice interrupted them as both boys began to run toward the door. As Mina ran up the stairs with her book in hand, she waved warmly at the bulletin boards to see which one was best for her story. Lucas jumped up, his eyes wide with excitement, asking what she was really doing in that classroom. The girl simply smiled, telling him she had just posted the homework updates and celebrated her team's top performance. Julia had such a big celebration over her new title. Lucas cheered her on as she stepped forward to celebrate being in the top tier again. Mina stared at Julia with a look of confusion as she wondered what department they needed for the upcoming semester. Mina told everyone that the academy was built with 5 big sections, and every single student got their own section once they started their first year. She thought she'd take the wind department because of what she had. Mina grabbed her bag and declared, "I'll wait for you in the wind department," while Julia smiled at Lucas, who pointed out that Mina was already recruiting people on her end. Lucas waved goodbyes as he prepared to leave so Mina could help out with her sister and headed straight for the martial arts class. Julia Ryan surprised everyone by winning the prize for her hard work. The freshman leader told class, "I'm not trying to impress anyone. I just wanted to show everyone what I actually know." In the end, the scoreboard declared Julia Ryan leading the elite team, with Iowa promising they'd never fail to beat her again. Lucas checked his watch because the martial arts wing was definitely not worth his time, yet he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there might be someone who could actually survive, standing right here and watching the building go up into the clouds. A young man named Kai Turway stepped up to the desk just in time to make sure the room was quiet enough for his quiet school days. When he finally arrived, the only sound was a gentle hum of conversation from everyone else. He turned away from Lucas and sprinted straight into the waiting line at the registration desk. Kai cheered when he saw his dummy shoot high, but Lucas only muttered that it was pure luck. The old man slid the lock and handed it to her, whispering that his bedroom was only upstairs. Kai jumped into the hallway with a huge grin and shouted, "See you soon," when he saw the lock was actually for room 205. 2 people stumbled into an empty corridor as they desperately searched for space. Kai and Lucas stepped out from behind the door with wide eyes, as suddenly another figure appeared right in front of them. Sharp and his best friend Collins went home together to live in the same room, starting today. Kai stared at the crumbling walls and felt like he'd lost his mind about the latest reports. He stared at the dark corner and felt his eyes roll back when he realized the smell was far worse than anything a pig would ever make. He was instantly startled when a spider landed, and he hurriedly asked Lucas, "Did I truly mean to end up living in such a filthy room?" He watched Lucas's face in pure surprise as he laughed out a strange, delighted sound. A young boy proudly held up a shiny coin, offering it as his reward for anyone who did the cleaning of the room, while Sharp and Collins watched the whole thing unfold. He stepped forward and said gently, "I hope the family's lives get better." The old gentleman slammed his heavy hand on the doorknob, shouting that he'd be right back in time for the big event at the main room, where everyone else had to get ready first. The uniformed guard stared at Kai with disbelief as the boy insisted his outfit was merely for work. Yet Kai snapped back, rolling his eyes and shouting, "I am not a beggar." A quiet boy looked at his backpack and told his teacher, "We need a new way to give students better treatment. Maybe we can make them wear something special just for being kind." Kai sprinted furiously into the large classroom as the school gates finally opened for them. The floor was a big canvas for Lucas as he made his way through it. He walked into the grand hall, wearing his brand new uniform with a big grin on his face. Kai walked through the bustling crowd, trying to locate his best friend Julia, but she wasn't there. He couldn't believe it. He thought her house would be far superior. Kai pointed at the front row where the top few were seated and noted that even if Julia had an impressive uniform, it wouldn't beat their own home. He stepped out and paused, watching Kai walk toward the far corner of the room where all the other desks were tucked away against the wall. Lucas hesitated and didn't say anything about the uniform, because he knew that seeing it on Julia made him worry more about whether any discrimination existed toward the martial arts department. Lucas leaned back into the chair, letting a nearby girl watch him with an interest that made him smile softly. A magnificent blaze of candlelight exploded over the stage as the lights flickered and danced with such grace that every audience member felt their hearts beat in time with the dancing fire. A vibrant flame bloomed suddenly right at the center of her palm. Floating on stage with his level 6 superpower, he whispered to the crowd that the new students deserved to feel truly honored. Thyroid Palamal stepped onto the stage and began to introduce himself as the student council president, while Theodore continued his speech on the floor and announced that the school's points were now being distributed. The audience laughed at the professor's name as he walked out of the room, treating it like an impossible discovery. As Lucas sat quietly in the back of the hall, he kept his eyes fixed on the man before him. At Alamagic Academy, the point system was the foundation of almost every decision made by the students. He showed a list of things he had learned: magic, books, taming animals, and the help of wise people, all worth spending points on. Managers could earn a lot of money, while most people only made a few dollars every week by doing boring tasks like cleaning or packing boxes. Winning points meant doing great things for the class rather than trying to figure out how to make a new student happy. Lucas realized that Mina had already helped them before he could even realize she did so. Teddy decided he'd join the student council because he knew getting a steady paycheck would make him feel safe and confident. Lucas paid very close attention as the speaker spoke. Theodore kept talking about how dangerous the job felt, even though he still loved watching monsters chase each other around. The secret was hidden deep inside the mountains, but he said those ancient beasts were waiting outside for the brave student to chase them down and get points. Lucas slammed his fists together in alarm as the air grew heavy, but then a warm, familiar smile finally broke through the tension. He looked around at the empty dorms of the academy, and suddenly he understood why they were built for him. It was a perfect training ground designed specifically to keep him awake all night. The young man drifted into the quiet room as he took a deep breath, feeling completely at ease under the soft cover of his own blanket. The flickering glow of incense burned, gently keeping all the room occupants asleep. He slipped through the shadows and revealed that a cloud of incense had made the peaceful moment seem too grand, allowing him to slip into the realm of the mythical creatures. He thought about that old, quiet hallway where the martial arts department lived and waited for him to come in. Lucas leaned over and saw the magic beast right next to that wall. He leaped across the tall wall with a wild burst of energy. He jumped from his chair onto the hillside where wild trees grew all around him, taking a fresh look at what was happening below. Lucas sprinted forward as a pack of wild beasts tried to turn back his running path. A giant beast surged forward from the shadows as he charged, sending a powerful downward kick that sent him crashing into something hard to tell what was coming next. His sharp foot landed hard against the monster's face with a sound like thunder. A massive cloud of dust flew into the sky when the ground hit hard and rolled itself forward. The little beast stayed completely still right inside that tiny, empty hole. A loud thud shook the ground as one of the monster's horns snapped violently from below. Perched high on a tree trunk, Lucas spotted that monstrous black-horned toad and immediately began searching for clues about its location before it could move away. Lucas held his glowing horn proudly, while talking to everyone around him about how their powerful magical abilities meant they could make even the most dangerous potions worth a good deal of gold points. He was so excited that he remembered he heard an old man say that Alamagic Academy held some truly legendary martial arts books inside their archive. Watching the towering mountains, the boy hurried because he had little time left and desperately needed to find out where the monsters were hiding. He pulled back his finger and pushed one of his eyes shut, letting the darkness fall over him so he could focus on activating that special power. Lucas watched as his mind expanded across a sprawling forest floor, ready to strike down any beast that stepped into view. The first threat was an enormous rat, but he didn't hesitate. He slammed it with force and sent it to sleep quickly. Then he pounced on the next giant bat, dodging its sharp paws before it even reached him. Lucas cheered as tiny explosions filled the forest, knowing his new materials would turn out better than usual while dragging a heavy sack, but he couldn't tell if any other dragons were lurking nearby. Lucas hesitated and asked himself whether that strong animal truly existed nearby. He pulled back his knees to focus completely on what lay right in front of his face. A mysterious shadow appeared just as the leaves shifted and caught his eye. Lucas stumbled into a dark cave and saw nothing but black shadows before he knew what happened next. Inside that shadowy void, a menacing dark figure burst forth, and then a snarling wolf with piercing, glowing eyes materialized into the gloom. Lucas grinned and jumped over the forest as a beast stared right at him from across the field. He dropped his heavy sack right under the stone cave door as he stepped out into the cool night air. Then he walked into the creature's hiding place as if he were trying to enter one himself. He felt the roar of a massive level 6 fire and ice wolf as it slammed into him from behind. The towering monster locked onto the boy's back with terrifying glare. The wolf realized it was meant to be the toughest protector on the pack, so it lunged toward whatever was charging behind him with its jaws wide open for a fierce assault. He gripped his fists tight and began to invite the enemy to face him. Lucas charged forward, but his punch sailed too far to hit the wolf's paw before the beast unleashed a massive burst of freezing magic that nearly knocked him off balance. Lucas covered his forehead in ice during a fierce fight, but that sudden shield kept the beast from turning on him, leaving Lucas alone as he took a hard blow to its face. The wolf's eyes went wide in shock as he felt his chest flare with pain, and instantly, Lucas crashed backward into the cold air while clutching a piece of ice to shield him from the sudden impact on the stone walls behind him. Standing over the dying beast, he groaned about what if his extra training meant he'd kill far more victims than he intended. Lucas ruffled his hair and yelled, "Oh no, it's not finished." The wolf lifted its head to focus the fiery ball inside its throat. The intense blast of flame exploded outward and completely engulfed the whole room. In the blaze of fire, the beast stayed firm, while the wolf barked furiously at the heavens before reaching out to save Lucas from harm. A fierce beast stood its ground as a young boy launched a mighty strike that knocked his very first enemy off his feet. The shockwave hit hard and made the giant hesitate for a split second before it finally lunged forward to strike again. The giant monster slammed its fists into the rock and sent a massive cloud of dust flying back toward the sun, while the small wolf scrambled up the cliff edge just in time to avoid being swept away by the falling debris. Lucas stared at the dead creature as it made a perfect decision. He could turn hot into freezing water instantly. The wolf looked down upon his friend, even as he was bleeding, because he knew that only a true friend would watch his wounds with such care and kindness. A strange glow peeked out from the creature's mysterious eye, as if a hidden clue was being unveiled. The shadowy figure with eyes flashing like stars whispered to me, "You're seeing something strange out here." The wolf lunges with fury as Lucas steps forward to meet its roar, and suddenly the creature fires 2 deadly blasts of fire and ice at once. The shadowed figure watches with cold fury as the monstrous creature unleashes 2 deadly elemental beams of fire and lightning. 2 powerful beams of light shoot out from the sky, hurling them relentlessly at him. He sees steam bubbling up from where 2 forces are crashing into one another. A fast blade cuts through his guard and leaves a loud splash of blood behind. The wolf lets go of the distraction and runs away. Lucas ducks under a flying beast bolted like a spear and yells, "Don't try to get away," while the creature darts through the darkness. He reached for the monster and managed to snatch the wolf's tail away from its owner. With a mighty twist of his wrist, he whipped the ball so fast it soared straight up and caught in midair. Lucas grips the pile of fur tight as he declares that battling such a colossal creature was not only fun, but also earned significant rewards. Then, a flicker of shock passes over him as he notices something unexpected. A second identical wolf steps into the fight, ready to tear apart whatever beast he had just stood beside. The massive figure crashes into Lucas's back with a thud as he ducks under the heavy weapon. A mighty blaze erupts through one roaring wolf while the rest of the pack rushes over to strike from above. The fierce wolf's fire attacks become stronger as the day progresses. Lucas sprinted forward and shouted loudly as he charged toward the floor, his voice cutting through the air like a warning bell ringing out for everyone below. The punch is so powerful that it sends a huge wave crashing down onto the floor as he roars loudly. His clenched fist trembled violently as he felt the shockwave of that final blow. The powerful blast of energy rippled all through the empty cave like a storm cloud rushing toward the darkness. He stares at the 2 wolves who are pinning him down, wondering if they will finally take his life before he can even think about using his last resort. 2 giant paws slammed down hard onto the dirt, right as they were already here to meet a big new monster in disguise. Suddenly, a much bigger wolf steps up and blocks the way. A colossal monster swings wildly as he lets go of 2 towering cores, the fiery one erupting into flames, and the icy one freezing instantly onto the dusty floor below. Lucas stirs his curiosity inside him and asks himself if those glowing spots are really beast cores. In this enchanted realm, tiny creatures are born from powerful magic, and when they step on your heart, they turn into your most loyal companion. So, Lucas steps forward and smiles warmly while asking if the wolf wants to be his loyal servant. The young man nods with a cheerful grin, confirming that he's happy to accept the offer. The wolf thinks this purchase is wild and foolish because, in real life, no ordinary mage has ever shown up with a level 6 tamer beast, and the animal seems genuinely unfocused despite its size. Lucas soon begins the sacred ritual he needs to do. He's taking a tiny bit of his power and pouring it into those two powerful cores right now. Lucas finds his way back to the wolf, who has already offered its cores to the beast. Surprised by what he hears, Lucas turns around to find the source of that voice. He looks carefully around before realizing that it is indeed the wolf speaking. Lucas understands instantly that this creature knows exactly what he needs from him. Lucas called the wolf a good boy, so Lucas decided to give it his name, Ul. The beast nodded in agreement. Lucas then wondered whether that territory belonged now to him, and if there was any valuable loot from its hunts. The wolf looked around with a determined gaze. A big brown wolf leans in close and gently rubs its nose right into the boy's cheek with a soft, happy touch. He followed Ul toward the hidden treasures while Lucas praised the cave for its genius. The air felt thick and still as they watched a dozen tiny, sleeping things bobbing lazily like ghosts in their own space, drifting down to the floor one by one. Lucas covered his nose as the overwhelming smell of rotting meat washed over him. The adventurers found a treasure chest full of the hide of a majestic level 6 magical beast and some priceless gems. He was stunned by the sudden clarity. It wasn't even a treasure trove at all. It was just ordinary stuff waiting for someone like him to find it. The fallen adventurers near the ruins found their master's hidden treasure in these massive beast cores, some at 3 levels, others 6. It was the wolf who told him how he got it, by eating up all those high-level cores with water and fire, so his new beast could eat anything equal or above them to level up. It sounds like Ul has somehow knocked down 2 giants along with his own strength, and the guy who helped win that match is now giving him a big cash prize to thank him for his hard work. As the wolf sniffed at the scent, it clearly felt the smell was excellent. Lucas explains that his healing potion can cure magical beasts too, and he's now tasked with protecting those treasures while they recover from it. He jumped up and cheered with pure enthusiasm when he finally accepted his very first mission. Standing right beside Ul, Lucas says it's time for the next step, and then a small, quiet smile touches his face. That day, sunlight bathed the schoolhouse so its grand walls gleamed brightly against the sky. Lucas and Sharp stepped into the room, where IWA Miranda was already settled, as one of them laughed out a yawn while the other noted, "Even though I'm doing an all-nighter, I still don't feel tired because of the sleep incense." Ul kept whining so hard that he couldn't help counting his precious things again. The heavy clock ticked as the bell rang, signaling a busy hour at the martial arts classroom, where few students were still there. The teacher was gone from school so sharp that even the class couldn't figure out which way he went. Kaitaro says the school likely forgot to give them a teacher, but Lucas thinks it's very unlikely. Shuffling footsteps echoed faintly through the hallway. A mysterious man slips into the dark room, swings violently over the table with his legs, and slams his fist onto the floor while shouting about the way he feels like he's drunk up to the ceiling. Sharp watches the scene while Lucas keeps his face completely calm. The new character leans against the doorway, introduces himself as Shigert, and proudly announces that class is now starting. He watched Lucas quietly while Shigert scribbled his name on the blackboard, then turned to the class with a small book in hand ready to read. The tall Kaitaro takes a deep breath and drops his eyes onto the classroom door as he looks toward the teacher's face. This man demands to know if that guy is actually his real professor, because he can't help but notice he certainly doesn't fit the role. A blur of motion sweeps across the stage and hits Lucas hard. The quiet room went silent as Kai stared at the screen, his face pale with a sudden shock that made him feel like he was stepping into something unexpected and completely out of place. The quick glance from Lucas sparked a warm, genuine smile in the air. A loud bell rings as the professor shouts for everyone to stand up and turn their heads in unison, shouting that no one can leave without first getting permission from a specific person. A loud call rings out for Tishy as she replies, "Yes." Then Lucas steps forward to confer his own spot. Finally, after Colin speaks up, Sharp is called in quietly and left alone by the silence that follows. Professor snapped the book shut and shouted loudly, making sure every single person was right in front of them. Shiggert thinks his school books are gone and decides to pick up a few from Tishi, who looks shocked when she sees her own name on the list of missing papers. The professor confirmed that her was the one who had told him everything. Kai Taro stood tall while shouting about fair selection, boasting of his family's strength and talent before a punchline slammed into his face. The man's hand trembled as Shiggert pointed at the clock and whispered, "It's already late." Tishi looks around nervously as he says, "No speaking without permission," before handing over the study books and walking out into the hall. The young woman sees the only way out and feels like she can finally change her fate. Kai is ranting that the professor looks suspiciously different than usual when he talks to him. Kai asks Kai if he can be reported by the administration, while Lucas watches Shiggert's slow steps and spots a few cracks in his legs. Lucas leans in as the professor holds on tight before getting hurt again, so he tells Kai he never wanted to complain about it. Meanwhile, Kai is trying to figure out why Lucas kept saying things like strong, mysterious teacher, and asking why they only had self-study because of that one person. He kept ranting about Master Jones' recklessness all night while Julia called out, "Big brother," and Lucas gently tapped her head as the day began. Julia loved watching Ms. Linda do a great job teaching every student, so she decided to take the lead in running for class rep this week. Did she ask the martial arts department if they picked a single person for him? Lucas smiled and said it wasn't. Lucas invited them over for lunch and told them the food tasted great. Then Julia burst in front of him with a shout, screaming that they have to stay back while she chases Kai away. You can't really make new friends at Alamagic Academy unless they bring in enough money to get them a chance to trade cash for points. Those fancy dishes are actually pretty tasty. Julia pulls out a box of yummy food and hands it to her big brother, who happily eats it all away. Kai stared at the floor, wiping sweat from his forehead as he muttered, "No way this was right." The elite class earned 10,000 points, while the martial arts department only received 10. So a staff member told Kai to leave if he had a problem. Kai thought about it and realized that even when the staff talked openly against their field, untalented students still needed to work hard and save points. It feels like Kai has completely given up on having a say in the place where he was supposed to go. Julia handed Kai a bowl of delicious food and, touched by the warmth, told him she was just a pretty little sweet girl. Meanwhile, Lucas noticed his friend acting too bold for his age, so he quietly watched her try to make it seem like someone else. Kai sits next to Lucas while Maya rushes over to join them. She smiles warmly at both of them and says, "We got a chance to see each other again." Julia invited Maya over, but the shy girl politely declined her offer of a cookie, noting that she had just finished eating. Instead, Maya handed over a pastry she had made herself as thanks for their kind words. Lucas smiled at Maya while trying the cookie, praising her as an amazing chef. She takes a deep breath and lets out a soft laugh as she sees everyone's wide-eyed admiration for her. Kai steps forward and hands Lucas a chocolate chip cookie while smiling warmly at him as he introduces himself as Kai Taroi. Maya Rasta steps forward for her turn while Lucas watches from behind the screen. Julia waves her hand at Maya as she steps back into the shadows of the dining room. Lucas admitted that the cafeteria was a very bad spot for meeting anyone. Mina stops at the table to ask Lucas what he thinks of the food, but the moment he asks that question, Theodore Palomel suddenly leaps from the ceiling with a burst of fire magic. He floated through the lunchroom proudly, showing everyone off like a star in a new costume. The air suddenly crackled as Lucas took a bite of his favorite cookie while Theodore sat quietly on the bench next to him, looking around for clues that might explain why he's been staring at a spot he once visited so rarely. The professor slips out of his chair and stumbles toward the window, clutching a glass as he lets a smile fade in the cool evening air. He grabs a drink last second before his feet hit the pavement, then stumbles off the bench and skids out into the quiet academy trail. Soon, Shiggert steps through the door and opens his mouth wide, as if to speak something big that he has never said before. Two men are inside a crowded room, shouting that they're the only ones left in line for his next visit. One person decided that running around the martial arts department would actually fix his life. His friend said, "You shouldn't blame him afterward because of what just happened," while she sat down and stretched as a blonde woman stared right back through the window. She stares down at him with a very serious look that makes his face go pale. They tap their fingers hard on the table to grab someone's eye and make them listen. With everyone gathered, the meeting finally starts. The old man stood and announced that this was the annual magical beast taming tournament held by the Carmina Empire, a celebration invited to every freshman from Alamagic Academy who could make it there. The teacher claims that dozens of leveled-up mythical creatures are all set up by hand in preparation for this special event. A professor decides to let 6 days pass and says that staying is better than showing up tomorrow. He slammed his hand down hard, yet Shiggert jumped forward to stop him. The professor smiled, knowing exactly that everyone in class was trying to hear him when he said he was just thinking about the students. The teacher stops and says, "If you're both still in junior high school, then martial arts students have to join the fight." The teacher says that everyone gets the same respect and care now. The man wonders why those stubborn professors still stand by Linda, even after the scandal hit hard. The student and his teacher look down at the professor with a sneer in their eyes as he holds up a blank page to explain something nobody understands. He lets them know he won't stop pushing back, even though they think he's going to scare them. The old man shouted, "It's decided." Then the martial arts department came out and said yes to everything. The door clicks shut as a nervous professor walks out of his classroom, leaving behind a quiet moment that feels too perfect to be real. An instructor steps forward to ask Linda if she believes this is right, then clarifies that while true fighting takes a lot of effort, the actual contest could be just as tough on them. The moment Linda offered her soft smile, the story had already begun. I can't quite remember what she said about her grandma, but I think she remembered a very quiet story she shared years back. Shiger believes a coward can never claim to be a martial artist. Anyone who refuses to show up at the tournament leaves their department. It has been announced that the magical beast taming tournament runs for 6 days, and after the lesson, everyone will receive practical combat training so they can finally defeat a magical beast. Kaiteroi asks himself if joining this competition was really worth it, knowing that a class representative is already selected by them. Then he hears the teacher whisper, "Stay still," and the classroom begins its lesson. Outside, the class started their drills. Lucas tucked in and watched as a girl was hurled hard against the wooden wall. The girl in Tishy's hands prepares perfectly for battle. A new kid was laughing when his friends all got in for a quick checkup and told him everyone had passed because he wasn't doing much better than them. Tishy charges forward and delivers a powerful kick that sends a cloud of dust flying everywhere. As Lucas slipped past his fellow student, he sent them stumbling back into the hallway. The Shigert soldier lifts his heavy steel tank cap and shouts, "It's late. The whole day's training is over." Kaiteroi sits on the dirt and whispers that he has finally finished his mission. A cool wind carries the scent of cold cuts through Collins' shop as he steps into the room, while a confused Kai looks for something he missed on their last visit. Sharp was puzzled by how he suddenly got the chance to trade a coin in exchange for free food. Sharp is so happy that he lets Collins apologize for bringing him the new tablet, knowing he'll be thrilled to use it right away. He watched as a friend hugged Lucas, offering to show him how to be better than the way he is. Lucas laughs as he sees Lucas smiling and thanking him, then politely says, "No, I decline." Kai remembered that his friend Lucas had a sister in the top club, so he didn't have to worry about getting too many points. Later that night, Lucas stared at the screen and felt a deep sense of disappointment as he saw Kai get it all wrong. Even without Julia, he doesn't really care what happens with his food. Lucas takes a deep breath and wields the wood, whispering that nature has already given him a feast ready for dinner while he cooks up the big chunk of meat on the open fire. He sat by the blazing fire and thought he might be able to train during dinner if he didn't need to leave Julia behind. He remembered what Vice President Mina did on that day. She tried to get right up to Julia's side and keep him off guard. He didn't want to let go of his defenses, so when she even had a small chance to try, he'd immediately make sure she was in danger before anyone could hurt her. Ul's long tail lags behind him, causing him to pivot into a new direction. The shadowy figure of Ul rushes forward and watches the fire crackling around the roasted meat. The meat is being handed over to Ul, making sure he eats it all right away. He rushes over and eats up the entire plate at once. He tells Lucas, after you finish your meal, Ul is ready to help you train, and he insists it won't hurt. They go into the woods together, but there's also an old lady sitting sadly by her window at night in the estate near Ryan. As Holt walks up, he pauses to ask, "Are those kids still on your mind?" She nods, smiling as they exchange a quiet look of reassurance. They said they had already begun their classes this morning. Holt thought he'd miss her a lot more than usual, so he suggested she check out and come visit them when holidays end. She is happy to let go of his hand as he pulls her toward Daku City, because he really has to get back to work there. The woman felt so happy because she could finally watch the little ones play together. Count Grindo's room is filled with many masked people waiting for him to come home. The group of 3 masked people stood still as a woman in bright green hair greeted them warmly, smiling brightly that Jessica was okay to come along with her. She invited her friend over so they could have a nice seat. The mysterious Jessica Ryan, donning a protective mask, watches intently from the shadows as she approaches the hostess. The hostess proudly introduces her latest creation, Jade Dream, a special, magical drink that everyone knows is in full swing right now. A green-haired lady reaches out and grabs a tiny glass jar filled with mysterious golden liquid before she gives the object to Jessica, who takes her hand as they move together through a dimly lit room. She carefully adds a couple of extra drops to the mix, treating them as the final polish before she leaves. The hostess leads everyone through the hall, and when the day officially starts, they all cheer because every moment counts. The hostess pokes Jessica's ear while Julia asks if she wants to kill Catherine and her daughter to be Baroness. Jessica agrees and explains what she must do. The green-haired woman just smiles, places a symbol on the table, and remarks that when a young sprout withers is truly beautiful. Tishy mentions they have more practical combat training this morning, but some students complain their bodies ache so much it feels like Mr. Shigert is a monster. She admits it hurts to get stronger, but says it's for her own growth. A classmate questions, while Lucas and Kai claim to feel no pain at all and watch Tishy closely. They conclude they'll become great martial artists when Kai brags about being the strongest in the class with his friends backing him up. Lucas just watches from afar. Meanwhile, Kai charges into combat yelling for them to start. The world seemed too quiet when Lucas slammed the air into Kai's face to stop the blow. The silence stretched out between them as everyone else watched their hands remain frozen in place, realizing that a simple block could have ended anything. Lucas swings his hands hard against the guard, sending them flying into the air like a powerful explosion. Kai cheered as he saw his friend hit the opponent hard with one sharp strike, sending everything flying away from their starting line. He laughed softly and said, "I'm not even sure." He glances down at Lucas watching his classmates practice under the stars, knowing that he's about to be seen in person. He slumped against the rough bark of a massive oak as he drifted deep into a quiet meditative trance, surrounded by the rustling leaves that seemed to whisper secrets beneath his heavy head. Kai steps forward and waits for the strange man to say hello first. Kai grabbed a distraction, so quickly his hand slipped on the floor, shouting that he had made a mistake when leaving the room. But his punch missed entirely, and he was sent flying onto the carpet. Lucas knew he'd never see the other guy again since they were fighting off each other, so he told him to stay in the corner and don't let his guard down. Lucas simply agreed and immediately moved into action to keep the momentum going. A quiet moment sets in when an elderly gentleman finally stands up and walks away, leaving behind a young woman who urgently wants to ask the director about his return to the library. However, as she hesitates, the director declares the man a very interesting individual. The boy hides behind a wall, letting only his heart reveal his real strength. He decided to remember Lucas because he couldn't figure out how strong he actually is, yet while Kai laughed at the end of the day and the game ended a few hours later, the story was already over. It happened afternoons long ago when Mr. Shigert showed up and said, "Don't forget your body." He told a classmate, a sharp boy in his 20s, to massage Lucas' knee, saying it was perfectly where he needed to be today. Lucas looks at the screen and feels a big wave of excitement wash over him as he finally steps into this exciting new world. He decided to start by grabbing all the supplies he needed to get started. He walks into the Allen Magic Academy magic supply store to compare its massive collection of rare items directly against a big shopping mall. He's a pretty good guy for a cost of 30 points, which means he has to spend them all on himself every single day. He thinks the offer is too good to pass up, even though every single dollar might add up quickly to cover his monthly costs. Julia was always the one with the big points, and he couldn't let himself stay dependent on her because losing his lunch money would make him feel terrible. So he grabs a tiny magical spell to slip into his soaking tub and starts trading stuff for gold while everyone else drifts off. When she finally snaps out of bed, the world goes silent as the shop clerk finally moves to get up. Lucas steps up to the register and asks, "Can I get that one?" A clerk tells him his final score has been set at 5 points. He's using his card to pay for the meal. The woman noticed that the man in her uniform was a martial artist. She saw him waste as much time as possible on the same single task, wasting away all his initial 10 points. Clear checks out the cash for 5 points and hands the toy over to Lucas, who immediately cheers. She asked him if he really could use every warning about regretting wasting his points, yet he insisted there wasn't enough, promising he would always return to buy more. The clerk thought the guy was noble because martial artists never get potion classes. She lets out a sigh and pushes the leather back against her chair, muttering, "This is exactly why I hate being a noble." That night in his dark cave, Lucas basked in the warm glow of the hot tub. He thinks pouring the potion into the bath won't erase its healing power, so he worries hard not to let anyone take it. He stands in the shadowed room where nothing but dark shapes seem to form around him. Lucas steps back from the shower, feeling completely refreshed and ready to grab whatever supplies are in the bag so he can earn more points. Lucas watches as he steps into the water with a resolve to stay grounded in everyday skills. Yet suddenly something terrifying happens, something that demands his full attention before he can even look away from the pool where it just emerged. Hiding behind a barrel, Lucas leans in to ask if UI has drunk up everything. The wolf doesn't move. Instead, it watches with a cold, unblinking stare. Lucas stepped out of the tub, knowing he'd be stronger for his new job anyway. UI smiles over his work and asks Lucas if he wants more meat instead. Lucas jokes that this will solve the water waste issue, before planning to trade materials for points in 3 days while hiding tools near the dorms, though the shop clerk who sees him carrying a heavy tool tries to offer magic help and refuses. He waves her off as his little blessed girl. The legendary Shigert walks through a crowded hall, whispering urgently to his audience, shouting, "Remember, the taming tournament happens today, so grab your gear before you leave." The teacher gently told the class to stop slacking it off, so you could just walk away and go home if you'd rather not train. He pointed out that Sharp had a very high leg, which made him really easy to hit when he got too close to the ground, then turned his attention straight back to Kai. He asked why Kai did such a stupid thing, while the kid just said he was already stronger than Lucas, Sharp, and Collins. The teacher slammed Kai down on the floor, shouting to his teammates, Lucas, Sharp, and Collins, who all shook their heads in agreement that the match had truly ended. Shigert looks at the ceiling and sighs loudly. "This makes my whole house feel like a mess, because spoiled nobles keep trying to steal things." Then he gave Tichy a tough fight for Kai, and they stood ready right where the trainers said they should be. Kai knows exactly when his time will run out, and he's ready to show everyone that he's the best, because if he doesn't protect them all now, nothing else matters. It was Tichy who first invited him to begin their adventure. He kicked her in the face and screamed, "Take the hit." Kai lets out a laugh as he feels the blow, but Tishy's hand snaps back to crush the air around him before hitting the man again. As she slammed her leg into the air, she watched him struggle to land the blow before swinging forward with surprising speed. As Kai watched his opponent swing back at him, he froze mid-move and waited for her move again. A single punch from Tichy sends him flying straight out of the way. He lies on the floor, staring at a faint scar where his own name has been scratched. She thought the moment she got close, he didn't let go of his shield but shouted back that she couldn't be underestimated. Tichy immediately grabs a new hand and strikes with a powerful palm blast. She kicked the guy with one sharp, clean strike, and sent him running straight for the door. Lucas watched the team's defeat and said with a big smile, "Now I understand exactly why the teacher decided to make Tichy the class president." Shigert ordered everyone to listen carefully before we even get started. Tichy steps up beside Kai and gently asks if he feels all right. The teacher warned that tomorrow every single person needs to tame at least one magical beast before the day ends. The martial arts teacher isn't afraid of losing a student. He's actually ready to ban them all if they ever get careless again. The sky turns a deep, vibrant red as Shigert prepares to face all of their might in battle, ready to push every ounce of strength against the sun's last light before daybreak begins. Lucas gently steadies Kai as they step away from the broken floor, their movements moving with a calm confidence in the quiet room. The man told the girl her mistake was huge, and even though she refused to listen, he promised himself he would fix it soon. It feels like his very first defeat against a girl has become his favorite name for her kids, so the next morning the class is forced in a line by order. He pointed out that the town was enormous and immediately began wondering how many scary magical beasts were lurking nearby just as they started to freeze. 2 freshmen in a different class mocked the martial arts students for mocking them, promising that they would be crushed instantly. Shigert was proud to tell his students that he had spent their days practicing the rules so they could focus on the real game rather than worrying about silly doubts. Lucas perched comfortably beside his eager teacher while waiting for class in the bleachers. The boy peered from his position, searching around for something he missed. Lucas gently nudges Kai with a playful grin and says, "Hey, admit it. You're feeling a little flustered, so maybe pretending that the wild creatures are actually Mr. Shigert is just the best move for tonight." He whispers to Kai, "We don't have much power. So picture yourself taking down the arrogant Mr. Shigert." Shigert warned the group that he could actually hear every single word they were speaking. Kai stands silently as he hears Lucas whisper warning about the monster's power, then sees announcer's voice appear above him before he can react to it. Julia steps forward and tells everyone to come in line for their spot on the first team of runners. The announcer explains the rules while taming 10 magic beasts to earn a perfect score, with a strict 10-minute time limit. Julia steps into a strange place that looks exactly like the gate she came from. She thinks the tiny hut might hold dozens of magnificent beasts. The 2 big beasts with razor-sharp teeth burst into view right at her face. She waits for the rest of the group to move aside before she grabs her weapon, ready to strike hard whenever anyone gets close enough. She threw her charm at the small magical creature and watched as its tiny claws tore through the air with a loud crack. The announcer tells us that as the beast finally lets go, bright fire bursts out of its chest like a living explosion. She called her students over, told them the last contest had finished, and waited for anyone who wanted to take their spots in the final round before heading off alone. The instructor cheered as the girl sprinted through the hallway in just 3 minutes to thank him. Then she asked where the martial arts competition was held so she could catch her brother. He told her it was at Site 10, the very final spot. She grabbed a snack while waiting there. A shy little girl steps away from the main hall and heads toward the door that leads out to the living room. Miranda looks at Lucas and thinks, will he get that amazing entrance show result? 2 hours passed, and the worried student still wanted only 1 point. Then his classmates said, don't worry about that. You'll make it. The magician told everyone that he was only letting 3 people into his secret tower. The few elite members and their friends, while anyone else with just a little magic got stuck in the dark. Doesn't anyone know that Kai is worried about getting lost during his martial arts training? Lucas assures him he isn't losing ground against the mages because their raw strength is truly comparable. Shigert clapped his hands together as if he had absolutely agreed. The teacher paused his lecture and looked at the class with a sigh of relief before turning back to the board, knowing that no student would have any fear for having their own little magic beast protect them from falling into traps. The professor tells the students their power beats even a low-level mage and firmly urges them to take bigger chances before any fight happens. The class stares in wonder at the strange way a teacher named Mr. Shigert keeps nudging his students, who are clearly enjoying every second of his lessons. Tishi walked out into the street, checking her pockets before heading back inside. Nobody got hurt. It turns out most students are just way too drained to hold any more spells. Tishi revealed a crucial secret about her discovery earlier on. The doorkeeper steps aside, letting the students pass through a wall of stone that blocks all their chances for freedom. Don't worry, she said. If your friend isn't winning yet, you shouldn't try running at all. Just find the weakest beast and let them take the trophy. The kids hug her hands because she shared a secret about Tishi's plan. The professor watched as a terrible student began sneaking around the classroom and then turned to Shigert and said, you know what happens when you don't have any smart skills? You just rely on those stupid tricks that everyone else uses. Shigert asked for his wish, and Greg answered that the military had come out to protect the group. He's telling us the students need to work harder because if they don't, the whole department could be closed out. The professor was quietly staring at the chalkboard for a long time. Greg insists that disappearing from the office won't bother anyone. He never even meant for his company to start over. The guy then walks off, chuckling happily as he leaves. He watched Lucas step away, remembering how that jerk was exactly like the bullies from his own past. Lucas stands up and checks his watch to see which moment comes next. Specifically whether he wants to lead the crowd at the entrance ceremony or wait until Lucas himself takes the stage. Shigert says his name is a name that makes people feel nervous, but he has an emergency plan. He can pass the time by letting another person walk out while he stays in the room. Lucas looks down at his phone and says, I'm not going to the party. I'm going to my own house now. Lucas is ready to prove his worth by showing up in person wherever people hate the martial arts department. His classmates cheered for him while he shouted how loudly they were making fun of himself at the school play. Professor Shigert noticed that everyone had suddenly gone quiet and trembled for only a fraction of a second before the silence settled. He tells the class not to forget what Tishi taught him, while Lucas dismisses the idea of being polite by saying it's not the way to go. 10 minutes passed as Lucas stumbled into the dimly lit, misty arena where his courage was about to be tested again. You're holding your fists up in a tense stance like something is about to happen right now. The stars are waiting for a brave traveler to find the magical power of perceptions, and suddenly they turn into glowing orbs that dance above their head. He stops running and hides behind a thick wall so that no one can see the scary monster hiding inside. A mysterious explanation shows that when a powerful beast meets its master, they share a soul, allowing them to talk and act together at will, while a white wolf gnaws relentlessly on another bone. The wolf lifts its head in awe as it realizes its master is already so strong that the beast can no longer compete. In the middle of the arena, a wolf's paws burst into existence and immediately charge at you. Lucas stands with his wolf spirit in hand and says, subduing a small monster is simple, but a giant owl swoops right down at my face. She looks at him with suspicion while he tries to explain the dangerous beast before his retreats are called off by order. The owl charges fiercely with its claws and then flies away toward that big round place where Lucas catches it in the air using his magical paw. He grabbed the book and whispered, to help them learn better without fighting, I need to stop what they're doing right now. The giant beast crashed right onto the dirt. He steps closer and whispers, Lil's magic works fine for us. But she knows a big beast like that will scare everyone down below. The creature's eyes snapped open as it fell into a deep, involuntary trance. Lucas felt relieved as Lucas thanked him for so effortlessly submitting the work. The wild beasts are ready, so he won't let the potion smoke leak until he has finally tamed them all. The owl stayed on the ground, subdued by its own silence. It whispered a promise of departure before vanishing into the distance. Outside the arena, the scoreboard says Lucas Ryan's score remains at 0. Julia insists that since she earned a perfect grade last semester, Kai must have been jealous of her early results. Holt Ryan sits at a table and watches the students from far away. Greg sighs as his 0 score reveals the only way to truly be a champion, beating the lowest level magic beasts. Shiger pauses his watch as he hears Greg speak about how those two worlds are different, then says nothing to match his silence. Julia snaps and scolds the guys for mocking her brother, yet she insists on seeing him as an absolute miracle just because he doesn't need any spells. Holt Ryan grumbled that defending the martial artist made her look like she was completely blind to everything else. Greg tells her what to do and then sees the notification saying Lucas Ryan got a single point. Kai and Tishy are having a great celebration, so they can definitely stay in the martial arts department for a long time. Professor Chandra asked himself why he was so relieved to see his class's best student getting only a single point, knowing that the actual top score for everyone else was 5. It's like a race where points are being awarded every second, racing toward 2, 3, or 4. He gasped, not because he was surprised by a perfect number, but because the martial arts team had outmatched his top student in a way that left him completely stunned. In the wild arena, Lucas steps onto a massive serpent. Observing how easily his classmates scored with so many intimidated creatures, he quickly grabs his perfect score and slips away just as a fierce lion-like beast suddenly materializes before him.